presenters. We have Molly Balanek from Laurel Tree Advisors, and she's just going to give us a couple words on how we can not be so stressed when thinking about our personal finances. Molly.
Donna, there's not much that's more stressful than thinking about your money and whether you're using it right or responsibly. A lot of people feel like there's rights or wrongs when they come to money, and it's really not. It's just about what's best for you and how to make it fit into your own goals. What I wanted to say tonight is really very brief, and there's a tool that's in your bag that you'll take home with you, and it's called Financial Clutter. This time of year, everybody's thinking about getting organized, getting ready for spring cleaning when we dig out from all this snow. And one of those things is often, how long do I have to keep all this paper? Or how long do I need to keep all these electronic records? And this is a checklist for you as to how long you need to keep things and why you need to keep them. And then I'll be available to circulate if anybody has any questions about it or want to know anything else. But Laurel Tree Advisors is an independent financial advisory and financial planning firm, and we help people take charge of their money. And that's, what's better than that, right? It helps me be very unstressed because you can shift it all over to me, and I know Lori, so I'm in pretty good shape. So thanks all for coming out tonight.
So I really want to thank Molly and Laurel Tree Advisors for helping to make this event possible. Next up, we have Laura Bennett of Embrace Pet Insurance. She is someone who I've known for many years. We met at a Cool Chicks and Cocktails event. Who knew we were cool chicks? And I think we were the only animal people there, so we were naturally destined to meet one another. So if you would like to say a few words about Embrace Pet Insurance, and while there are certainly other pet insurance companies, Embrace Pet Insurance is in our backyard, and she is the co-founder and woman extraordinaire.
Thank you. So yes, Laura Bennett, CEO and co-founder of Embrace Pet Insurance. We started Embrace because we discovered that pet health insurance was not really fulfilling the promise that people expected from a pet insurance product. So that's perhaps why, if you're not familiar with pet insurance, that's why. In the United Kingdom, actually, over 25% of cats and dogs are actually insured, because the product that started off fulfilled what people expected. But I'm not going to talk much about pet insurance. I'm going to be circulating around as well. But welcome to our offices here. We're delighted to host this. Dr. Anna, this cause is very dear to our hearts as well, and we do what we can to support. The role of the pet in the family is so important, not just for the joy and the companionship that they bring. They also bring health benefits as well, and we really support keeping pets in the household as long as possible, and that includes then the role of pet insurance to reduce the financial stress that pets bring, because like any family member, there's always some money and healthcare involved. So pet insurance takes the stress out of that, so you can give the appropriate health care to your pet when there's any kind of medical need. So I will leave it at that. Thank you very much, Dr. Anna, for having us involved.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you did not know, I'm Dr. Anna. I am founder, president, and CEO of One Health Organization. I founded this in 2008, and last summer we launched a program, the veterinary payment program. And what we do is we want to make sure that older adults and people with disabilities can afford veterinary care services for their dogs and cats. And we were pretty specific about that sector because they tend to be people who have a hard time affording things because sometimes they're on a fixed and limited income. Sometimes they just can't work. The disabled, as defined by the federal government, is really about those people who cannot make gainful income for themselves. And so we felt that those people who have pets in the home really cherish their animals probably a little more than some of us, because that might be the only thing, the only living, warm being that they feel loves them unconditionally. And so that's what makes our program so important. So while having a pet health insurance plan is important, some of these people can't afford that. And so there's this gap in how do we take care of these animals and how do we keep these pets in their forever homes. We're learning is that a lot of these people have taken these animals off the street, have taken them from a shelter, so they're giving this animal a forever home. So you hear a lot about these animal shelters. They provide great care, but what happens once they get into the home? How do we keep them there? Veterinary care is so important. If you live in a residential facility, you're required to have annual veterinary care services, and if you're making $750 a month, there is no way you can afford a $250 annual veterinary service fee. So that's where we come in. Vouchers are given to low-income, older adults and people with disabilities. We require written proof of that eligibility. We give them $250 worth of vouchers that they can use at any participating veterinarian. And Dr. Brian Forsgren is has one of the clinics that we serve, Gateway Animal Clinic, and there are 11 right now that are accepting vouchers. And we also know that there is sometimes even more needs. So Dr. Brian and I have talked frequently about, well, what about those animals that have the chronic ear infections? Those are very painful. And that costs more than the $250 worth. What do you do for those chronic situations? It's painful. It's an animal welfare issue, and it causes a lot of anxiety for these low-income people. They want to do what's best for their animals, and they will if they're given the resources to do so. So I'm really excited that we have multiple solutions for these problems. Let me just give you one story from this week. I got a call from Miss Linda over at Gateway Animal Clinic, and she calls me up and she said, I have a client. He's got AIDS. He's disabled. He has no money. Can you approve vouchers today? This poor cat is really angry. It bit him. So now we have a problem with the health of that person. We have a problem with the health of that animal, and that home environment is not healthy. So that's what One Health is all about, is keeping people healthy, animals healthy, and environments healthy. And the environment I'm talking about, the home environment. So, Dr. Brian, we were so happy that we could, at that moment, make the right phone calls and make it happen for that client. Reached out to his social worker and help seal that deal so we could get care for that cat. So I want to thank you for participating in our program. And now, Dr. Brian, if you would say a few words about the Project Noah Fund and a story about how beyond the vouchers, that's where the Project Noah Fund comes into place.
Okay, thanks, Anna. In 1980, I moved back to Cleveland, had to take a job, took a job at the Animal Protective League, worked there 19 years, got an idea how the poor people, the folks that aren't at this event tonight, they need their animals as well. And there's a vast demographic of poor folks, okay? People that have real problems, much more than we do in this room. And here's a note I got from Linda the other day. The husband was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, and he committed suicide, okay? The son is in jail, all right? Her florist shop went under, okay? And she's living on food stamps, and her cat needs a $400 ear hematoma surgery, okay? Those are the kind of situations that cross my desk, my face, my exam table every day. It's amazing how we live in this little microcosm of kind of upper middle class, lower middle, middle class America, which is dissolving. We've got a whole new United States emerging, and everybody wants to have a pet. Those pets are going to need some care, some level of care, okay? So Anna and I have known each other for a number of years. I started a thing called Project Noah some years ago, which is a nonprofit where I would take my client list. Often we have a walk-in clinic. I don't know if any of you have ever been there. We see about greater than 100 animals a day. Everybody just walks in, black, white, Asian, gay, whatever. They're all sitting around, and the one thing that binds them together is their pets, okay? And their fears and their anxiety over their health. So it's really kind of a neat sociological experience. And I would then people would say to me, hey Brian, here's $20 for that client, okay? So I took that to a nonprofit level and started Project Noah, and we would raise about $10,000 or $15,000 a year, and then we'd take that money and directly use it for animal care. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but it certainly helps in cases like Anna just mentioned, and this poor person whose cat needed an ear hematoma surgery. But life got busy, I got old, and I needed some help, and Anna came along, and we just kind of combined these things in an attempt to broaden the the reach that we can have in Cleveland, around town, where we can help many people with their animal problems. So Anna doesn't know this, but we're going to have in June, we're going to have a vegetarian dinner on a Sunday night, probably at Fat Cat's Restaurant in Tremont, and you're all going to get an invite, okay? And we'll see. We also have to think about our farm animals, okay? We ought to treat them well. They should have a nice life before we enjoy them on these little brioches, right? So it's not just pets, it's all animals. That's what we're here for, okay? And that's about it, okay?
Great.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you so much. And now it brings me great pleasure to introduce you to my new friend, Dr. Lori Stevick Rust, and she is going to talk about women, stress, and the power of pets. And she confessed to me that, you know, she isn't necessarily the person in the home that brought the animals in, and that sometimes happens. So she and her daughter are here to talk about this issue and about using animals for therapy. So, Dr. Lori, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Well, I already feel like a loser because I heard Molly say we're supposed to be already organizing finances. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So make a note, husband, that that's what we're supposed to be doing, because it's not what's happening in our house. What's happening in our house is all these pets that are taking a lot of our time. So thank you very much, first of all, for having me this evening. My job, as I understand it, is to start a conversation with all of you, first around stress, and primarily around stress in women. Back about, you know, when you're old, you say 4 years ago, but probably the reality is like 15 years ago. I got together with some colleagues, and we started to look at the research around women and heart disease, and we wrote a book called Heart Therapy, really looking at the specific cardiovascular risk factors for women. So I felt like the opportunity tonight to talk to you about stress, and you're a group of women, it was spot on for us to have some more dialogue about that. Because as all of you know, what is the #1 killer of women? Heart disease. So we have to start to look at, what is the #1 killer of women? Yeah. I heard it, I just want to make sure everybody else did. The answer was, the real answer is heart disease, but the answer over here was men, and that's a different conversation. I'm doing that one on Thursday next week, so I want to start, first of all, to talk about just some basic physiology, because I think it's a good reminder for all of us. When we think about anxiety, at the core of anxiety is really a very normal, protective, natural reaction called fear. Fear is protective. Fear is what gets us moving. Fear is what protects us from danger. Fear happens at the subconscious level. It's really a split-second phenomena that happens throughout the body. So as a reminder, we talk about fight or flight, but I think when we bring it down to the cellular and the physiological level, it's important for us to think about that primarily as women. So we're faced with a danger, and immediately what happens before our brain can even interpret it. So again, this is not cognitive, this is not conscious awareness. The very primitive area of our brain called the amygdala is turned on. And when it's turned on, it sends a signal down the spinal column, and it triggers the adrenal glands, which sit on top of our kidneys, and it releases adrenaline. Now, adrenaline does a couple of really important things for us. Gets the heart rate up, gets the blood pressure up. It opens up the lungs, it expands the diaphragm to allow us to breathe deeply. It slows down our digestive tract. It disperses the blood to our extremities, hands, feet, arms, because what do you got to do? You're either running from that danger or you're fighting, right? It's primitive, it's without conscious awareness. It's natural. When the danger's gone or we've taken care of things, what's naturally supposed to happen to the body is that physiological reaction begins to dissipate. Adrenaline removes itself, the cortisol levels that have been stimulated, that increases the glucose in our body so that the muscles can actually be activated, is supposed to fade. But over time, what we've done with this very elaborate system is we ruined it with our thoughts, right? So when people say, where is stress? We know what the physiological reaction is on the inside, but stress actually sits out here. So if you were going to give me, say, your top 3 stressors, things that cause you to feel stress, what would they be? Besides men, because we know, we clearly know they're one. Children, money, work. So when you think about that stressful reaction, and I work in a healthcare setting, so I know that there are a lot of times people with chronic medical illnesses can experience fear and pain and distress. But you put two people in the same room, and their experience of that stressor can be very different. And the question is, why is that? And the answer, of course, is how one interprets things. What's one's perception? What do we say to ourselves? Is a very, very powerful physiological mechanism. Because now we've taken something at the very primitive level and we started to involve our thinking. And boy, that really screws it all up, right? Because any sentence, and anybody who knows me, I always say any sentence that starts with what if and oh my God is going to take you no place good, right? Because what that does then is it says to the body, we are still in danger. So that adrenaline should not drop. That cortisol level cannot come down because there is still something to be dangerously out there. There's still something for us to worry about because the danger is still out there, right? So we begin to spin and we think and we dwell and the thoughts keep going. And what we're doing then is we're creating connections in the neurons in the brain that didn't exist before. So those neurons are now communicating with one another and we've created a template for stress. And the body keeps saying, we're still in danger, we're still in danger. As the adrenaline and the cortisol continues to rise in the body and it remains up there and there's no place for it to dissipate because your thoughts are keeping it going, it's the fuel, the body is in jeopardy. So when you look at the studies on cardiovascular disease in women, even when you hold constant the primary risk factors like hypertension and diabetes, when you control for that in the research, the number one thing that pops up still as a predictor for women going on to develop cardiovascular disease is stress. So it's not a fluffy little topic that we're talking about. It actually has some profound effect on our lives. So the management then of stress takes on 4 important things. First, if we have adrenaline and cortisol circulating through the body, we have to burn it off. So the best way to burn that off, of course, is with physical exercise or activity, right? I'm not really a dog person. I just want to confess to you guys, I had a child, and then I had dogs because I had a child. It was a vicious cycle. So we have to burn it off, exercise, activity, and I think Katie's going to talk a little bit about how we use our pets to incorporate and get some of that activity going. The second thing we have to do is to really look at our thinking. As I said before, it is the source that drives the fuel that keeps the energy going, keeps the adrenaline up. So overriding the thought process is critical in managing stress. The goal, again, is the balance. Hormones up, hormones down. When we're thinking about our thoughts, it's important that we begin to analyze the catastrophic thinking that we begin with. So what do you usually say to yourself when you're confronted with a stressful situation?
How am I going to deal with this?
Okay? So it's a challenge of, I don't even know if I have the resources, the coping, the ability, right? What else?
How can I avoid dealing with this?
How can I avoid dealing with it?
Why is this happening?
Okay, so it becomes that blame, like there's something, poor me, this is really happening and nobody else is experiencing these things, and then we can start to really pull ourselves down.
Take a deep breath.
Okay, taking a deep breath.
Simple.
A lot until you're hyperventilating, right? Because I see women doing that a lot. What we're trying to do by changing the thinking is we're trying to actually deprogram those neurons that keeps that amygdala in the brain moving. Because if the brain continues to believe it's in a state of danger, nothing you say to yourself is going to change that, right? Even when you say, oh, it's okay now, take a deep breath, everything's better. But you've already developed a chronic pattern, and that's where panic and anxiety and obsessive thinking and dwelling comes from. Once you establish the pattern, our brain likes routine, our brain likes structure, our brain likes habits. So it's really important that you listen in closely to what you're saying, because you're developing a network of thoughts that becomes harder then to disconnect, okay? The third thing that's really important when it comes to managing stress is, and you have to do these in a sequence. So I always say it's really like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Because if you've ever been really stressed and somebody says to you, just take a deep breath and relax. I don't know about you, but that makes me want to slug somebody, right? Because what you want is somebody to go, oh my God, I'm sorry, right? You're going through something terrible. You don't want them to jump to step 4 and tell you how to fix it. We need to be able to burn it up. We need to complain about it. We need to exercise it out. We need to do something with it, right? So step 1 has to be burning it off. Step 2 has to be really stop the thoughts, because again, they are our fuel. Step 3 has to be, now that you're in a better spot, cortisone's coming down, heart rate's getting back to normal, the blood flow is beginning to come back to the central area of the body and not just into the periphery. Now is the time to take a deep breath, meditate, engage with your pets, read a book, do something that is relaxing and enjoyable. Oftentimes I'll have people come in and they'll say, you know, I was in the middle of this panic attack and I kept telling myself, I gotta meditate, I gotta meditate. I thought, wow, if you could do that, you sit in my chair and I'll lay on that couch, because I don't know how that works. So again, it's really being able then to say, now I'm in a place, but now it's restorative, and it's critical that you engage in something that's pleasurable. This is where I think chocolate is important, but that's again because we do know that dark chocolate is good for the heart, so I thought I would slide that one there. But anything that's pleasurable, that re-engages us, that gives us that joy, this is the phase where that needs to come back in, and it has to be a cycle that we continue to repeat. Because you know stress continues to come. It's a vicious cycle that we can't just stop by doing it one time. The fourth part of that is something that, again, is really based in science, and that is cultivating a life of gratitude and embracing optimism. And it sounds really fluffy, and I always fear when I say it that I'm going to come off as that touchy-feely psychologist. But the truth of the matter is, when I say that there's science behind it, when we look at optimistic people, their mortality rates are different. The amount of chronic illness that they struggle with is different. So being able to say, all right, well, how do I become more optimistic? How do I cultivate this sense of gratitude? And the answer to that is really being able to step right into your moments. You know, where does pessimism sit? Pessimism really sits in our future and in our past. You know, we have regret, so it's, you know, why did I make those choices? Why did I do that? Everything bad always happens to me. It's usually our reflecting in the rearview mirror, right? And our anxiety sits in the future. What's going to happen? What if? Oh my God. But if we can step into our moment and go, at this moment, right here, right now, what feels good in my life? And it sounds really simple, but living active gratitude is different than having an attitude of gratitude. An attitude of gratitude is just kind of a nice little slogan for a calendar. But actively living with gratitude requires energy, requires mindfulness, that you are focused truly in this snapshot. If we don't get another hour today, and this is the end for us, what in this moment are you grateful for? And when people practice that kind of staying in the moment mindfulness, it actually releases stress hormones, dissipate, and it releases the feel-good dopamine, kinds of serotonin chemistries in the brain. We can control that. So I am going to pause for a moment and say that that for me is the important cycle of why we're here talking to women, because all of these risk factors have very strong connections to cardiovascular disease. So when I look at what are the things that we have control over, we have control over our thinking, we have control over our activity, we have control over the social support that we allow ourselves to engage in. Now you all are doing it right here tonight, right? Because you're out, you're with friends, you're connecting. People who are isolated, people who are lonely, their risk for depression goes up, their risk for anxiety goes up, and their mortality rates go up. So we know that social support, social connection is a critical element. And this is where really pets play a huge role. I do a lot of work in the senior world and specialize in dementia care. So for me, I know that when we bring a pet on a unit, it's a game changer. And why? Because specifically with dementia is a disease of cognition. So there's no verbalizing with some of our patients. It's nonverbal. Well, that's a perfect role for a pet, right? There's also something very rhythmic about petting. We talk about what kinds of things can we be doing that's rhythmic, that gets us into kind of a meditative state, why we do yoga, why we do rhythmic activities when we're chanting and meditating. Using a pet in that process is a natural, easy prop for you. So I am going to pause there for a minute. I'm going to introduce my daughter. This is a first for me to have my daughter co-presenting with me. This is my daughter, Katie Rust. She is a freshman in college, and I will just give the little backstory that when Katie was 5 years old, I didn't want pets. So that was true. I didn't have pets. I didn't want pets because I was stupid, I think, but because I didn't know better. Let's put it that way. I wasn't raised with pets. When Katie was 5 years old, she had to have some minor surgery, and she looked at me and she said, "If something should happen to me, I never got my dog." Now, being the psychologist that I am, I quickly turned to my husband. I went, "We're losers." And she got her pet 1 month later. And our first dog, and now is 14 years old, and we still have. But then Katie decided that he was starting to look depressed and he needed a friend after he was about 10 years old, and she brought another dog into our life. And as if that wasn't enough, this little teeny 4-pounder Yorkie Shih Tzu came into our life, and so we have 3. Katie fostered 19 dogs her senior year of high school, took sick dogs in, took care of them, and then found homes for them. And so I couldn't be prouder that now she has welcomed the dogs, taught us really what it means to be true pet owners and to embrace the pets in our lives. So Katie's going to talk a little bit about the therapeutic benefits of pets and some of the training that she's been doing, and she's going to introduce you to Bane. So thank you.
So, as my mom said, I'm a huge dog person. I always have been. I'm pretty sure I was just born that way. So when I went off to college, about a week in, I went down to South Carolina. My parents were still up in Ohio with our 3 dogs, and I lasted about a week. After a week, I went and bought a dog because my parents wouldn't let me take any of ours from home. They didn't know.
Remember I told you, losers.
Yeah, they didn't know that I went and got a dog, so I did it, and then I texted my dad and I said, "Hey, come here, sit down." I texted my dad and I said, "Roses are red, violets are blue, I got a dog." And then I got a very angry call from my mom, but things settled down, and they love Bane. And then about a month later, he got really, really sick with parvo. He was just a little baby, and down in the South, parvo is a lot more common. Up here, it's like unheard of, so some of you may not know what it is. It's basically like, it's kind of similar to Ebola in dogs, which I know it's hard to imagine, but basically what happens is the same thing. They vomit and everything, and then eventually their organs shut down, and he was in a very, very bad state because he was misdiagnosed at first. So he was put on supportive care, and I went every day to visit him for about a week. And thankfully, for my parents, they helped with the insane vet costs, which I wish I would have had pet insurance then. But but he made it through, and he was stronger than ever. We had a lot of people that sent prayers and everything, and we're really, really lucky. And it just has made me really, really thankful that up until this point we've had so far healthy dogs. And throughout that point, I realized that I helped him through a really hard time in his life. I was there for him. I gave him everything that he needed, and he kind of has done the same for me. Any really hard times that I've had, he's always there for me, and that's kind of what we're talking about today. It's like how pets help you manage stress, but not only stress, it's basically anything. You know, it's the typical, any of you that have a dog, you know, if you're crying or something, your dog will be the first one to know that you're upset and give you kisses, and how can you not smile? So basically the three formal types of dogs that can help people really like manage extreme anxiety attacks or panic attacks, things like that. You have your formal therapy dog, which is for people with like post-traumatic stress disorder or things that really impact their daily life. And then you have therapy dogs, which can go to hospitals and other places to visit them. And basically it's like, it's really stressful and really hard on people when they're in the hospitals, especially when they get bad news from the doctors, things like that. But it always brightens their day when the pets come around. I know like the nursing homes that my mom has worked at, the senior citizens always ask, you know, when are the dogs coming, when are the dogs coming? And it just, it's incredible to see like people that are so far advanced in Alzheimer's disease or things like that that really don't know a lot. They still know to like pet dogs and it soothes them and stuff. So they could be therapy dogs, or there's also, I'm blanking on, did I say no, it's like mental health. That's, yeah, it's, so you could have a mental health dog. So if you have severe depression or things like that, they don't have quite all of the rights as a regular therapy dog does, but they can still be there for you, especially for people that have like night terrors or things like that that come with their anxiety or depression. Their dog can be certified to help them out in situations like that. So I kind of wanted to show you guys a couple of things that dogs can do for these types of people. I just trained Bane with these like just a couple days ago. So if he's not really cooperating, I'm sorry. But the first one is for especially like veterans that come back with post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that. Say if they're out on the street and they hear like tornado sirens, which are the same sirens as they'll hear when they're about to be attacked, or if they're just outside and they see a plane fly overhead, a lot of times they can go into a trance and they don't know what's happening. They are completely unresponsive because they're, like my mom said, their brain is telling them, and like their nerves are saying that they're in danger. So some dogs can be taught to, so say if I'm staring up in the sky and your dog knows, oh, he's not responding, there's something wrong, which they can sense. They can have them like jump up on him, jump, and then like just keep jumping until, and like lick your face and stuff like that to get you kind of to like snap back into the moment, into the here and now. Sorry, you dropped it. You're dropping all of them. So, yeah. He can also help for people like, especially when they're having anxiety attacks or things like that. It's called deep pressure therapy, which is basically where your dog puts, basically self-explanatory, like a lot of pressure on your body to focus yourself on his body, things like that, which a lot of times will include petting, and they'll lick your face and things like that to kind of distract you from what's happening in your mind and bring you back to the here and now. So I'll show you a couple ways that they can do that. They can come up onto your lap, up, and like lean into you like this, lean. And you can like pet them. This is a really easy way to pet them and stuff like that. And they can even like come up and kiss. And like basically just sit here with you, because no matter what's happening, like I said, you know, it's natural instinct to pet a dog, even with people that don't remember their family names, they remember to pet a dog, and that's pretty insane. So those are 2 ways, and then they can also do what I showed you with getting your attention, but they can also do it for deep pressure therapy and put their elbows and their shoulders into your body and kind of like nuzzle you, because I mean, really, there's no way to ignore that, like when there's a giant dog on top of you. So, those are just a couple of ways, and then just different forms of that same thing. Another thing that they can do is that they can wake you up from night terrors. So if they hear you tossing and turning a lot, or if you're kind of like moaning or talking in your sleep, they can come and lick your face and stuff to wake you up. And they can be told to like go get your medicine, and you could say like medicine or whatever your cue word is, and they'll go get it for you and bring it to you. Another thing that they can do is to go and get help. So say if I'm in my room and something were happening and I said, Bane, go get my mom, he could go find her and bring her to me. Some can also be trained to dial 911. They can be trained to do just about anything. They also have an internal alarm clock. So if you train them, like when they're trained as puppies, if you train them to wake me up every single day at 7 o'clock in the morning, they will come, they will learn without an alarm or anything to come and wake you up at 7 o'clock. So that's a good way for them to remind you to take medicine. Because say if you have to take a certain medicine every day at 3 o'clock, they can go and get it for you at 3 o'clock, and then you'll never forget. I don't really know what else to say.
Maybe we can open up for questions. And he does some really fun things that I know.
He
are
does
really
fun things that are
therapeutic,
really.
but He can hold like 4 cookies on his nose and not move, and not eat them, and not touch them until he gets a signal.
We'll see it. Here,
And,
back up.
and Katie can't do it. We've tried to do it with
Sit down.
Katie. I put those cookies.
This is kind of a distracting environment, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to do it, but we'll try. Sit down.
It's the one that people like on Facebook, so I'm assuming this is a cool trick.
Take it. Okay. Take it. Leave it. Stay. No. No. Stay. No, stay. Stay. Okay, good boy. You can have them later. These take too long to eat. Sit down. I know, I'm sorry.
We'll open it up to questions because I know we want to keep this really interactive. I'm sure you have some good stories too, so.
Okay.
Yep.
I was just wondering with the parvo, like what was the course of treatment? Because I have heard of parvo, but I didn't think many dogs recovered from it.
Well, basically, it's like I said, the same thing as Ebola. It's basically just supportive.
Yeah.
A lot of fluids, a lot of things like that.
So while
There's-
we have Dr. Brian in the room,
Yeah, there's no.
this is a parvo on your time.
I feel a little bit like a neutered male. In any event, parvo is a viral disease and it attacks fast-growing cells, like your intestinal lining. So when you get it, you bleed through your bowels. It starts vomiting, high fevers, etc. It can then cause a lot of other secondary issues. Is it common? It's still common. In the 1970s, 80s, it broke out as a national and international viral problem with dogs. It didn't exist when I graduated from veterinary school in '77, okay? So it's kind of a whole new disease. We do have great vaccines for it.
Oh, I'm sorry, but can I also add that he was fully vetted. He had all of his shots, and I also waited 2 weeks after his shots to take him anywhere because I know that they take a little bit of time. But there are new strains that are coming about in the South, and that's just happened to be what he got.
We see about 150 cases a year at my hospital. It's still a huge problem in the north. Anywhere where there's dogs and dogs that aren't taken care of, it's a huge issue. In fact, and rescue dogs, shelter dogs, all that. You take all the poorest dogs in all the communities, put them in one area, it's like a free-for-all.
So it is contagious, like, is it airborne for the dogs or?
Yes,
Okay.
fecal, when they poop it
Oh,
out,
okay,
it's
gotcha.
loaded with viruses.
Because they are food sniffers. Yeah.
Yeah, when I went to go visit him, I had to be in full gown, things on my shoes, and I wasn't allowed to touch him. Bane, excuse me, sit down. Well, I was told that it can't, like certain types can be transferred to humans, but I don't know how true that is. I didn't ever look it up. I just went by what my vet said, and I was very cautious. I cleaned everything in my apartment to make sure that it was clean when he came home. But yeah, it definitely was not something to take lightly. I wasn't allowed to touch him for 4 or 5 days. I just had to see him in the kennel. It was really sad. But he would only eat or drink, like towards the ending when he started to get better, he would only eat or drink when I was there. So that was kind of cool. They were like,
We got that call from South Carolina that it was parvo, which when they were up here, they said, no way, he was vaccinated, he was fine. He flew home with her, got back down to South Carolina, and within a day, when we saw the pictures, it was like he was already curled up, and within 3 days, lost more than half of his body size. And then the vet called, because of course, and I'm the mom going, well, how are we going to take care of her who's going to have her first pet maybe die that far away? Because they told us that he had a 5% chance of survival. The way that he was. So,
yeah, we were really, really lucky.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, they went to Facebook with the prayer circles and people were donating, you know. It was so
Yeah, I was
very,
also-
very supportive, very, very supportive.
Yeah, I was also really, really lucky. One of my friends that I had just met maybe a week prior set up a donation page on GoFundMe, and that paid for a lot of our vet bills. I was really, really thankful for that. So
So the fact that he's here today is a little miracle, so. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
So how did you get involved with the therapy dogs in the various forms then? Just an interest?
yeah, basically just interest. We, my younger dog at home, she's 4 pounds. She's a Shih Tzu Yorkie mix. I tried to do it with her. She didn't pass the Canine Good Citizen test, but little dogs are hard. They're really stubborn. Ours are definitely not as well trained as he is, just because.
My kids aren't as well trained either, and I'm a psychologist.
But yeah, so I kind of just wanted to give it another shot, especially because my mom works in the nursing home. I see a lot of people there that it just how happy it makes them when the dogs come in and stuff like that. I just really want to be a part of that, and it's really cool that that I had the chance to start from scratch with my own puppy and be able to train him as he grows up, and hopefully he'll be able to pass the Canine Good Citizen test once he hits a year, and then we'll be able to become a certified therapy dog. Not right now. You're being bad.
He can get the remote, so that's very convenient.
Yeah, he can fetch the remote.
He knows the difference between the remote and the sock and the voice.
Sit down.
Yeah.
Katie, I think he has something to say. Go ahead to the microphone.
Do you want to say something? No, he doesn't speak on command. He only speaks when he feels like there's somebody there or something there it should not be. He's really not very verbal.
That's a good kind of dog to have, because we have a verbal one. This is much better.
That's right, he doesn't need to talk because the other one does all the talking.
Right, exactly.
Our dog, my daughter was somewhere in the back with the dog that she raised, and if I will say if instead of when one of us raises our boys in the household, Coral gets very upset, especially if we're yelling at Emma, and she'll come running over and jump and be like, stop being mean, and it breaks up the whole tension and it makes us laugh, and then the yelling stops. So she's really a very good, it runs good interference for us, and we didn't train her to do that. I think it's just the protective instinct or something. Emma probably knows why she does that.
They do have that. It's kind of that little teeny 4-pounder that Katie was talking about is very much wedded to my husband, who's in the back of the room. So the other night, actually, I was, it's full disclosure, it's family night here, right? So I was pretending and I was taking a swing and I was doing this at him in the kitchen, and she was barking, and in between us, somehow this little 4-pounder was Yeah.
She's gonna take you on.
Yeah, she really. Yeah. And he, of course, kept going, yeah, she's hurting me. But you're right, they do seem to know that.
You said that because a couple of years ago, my sister passed away, and I have a little dog. He's a dog. I found him on the side of the road. And I went to Georgia, and she passed away while I was there. When I came home, he started climbing up on my bed and climbing on my chest and laying on my chest and putting his paws up on my shoulders and not getting up. And I was like, what is this? But I think he was trying to get me to pet him so I could release some of that grief. And I mean, eventually he stopped it, but he never did that before.
I think they do have, I mean, there is research that talks about, when I talked about cortisol and adrenaline, there is a sense, of course, that dogs have when somebody is in that state. I have a 103-year-old grandmother, Kenya's great grandmother, she stays with us. And when she gets on the couch and she gets her stuff and she's all situated, all of the dogs want to come right by her feet, like almost, and when she gets up with her walker and she's heading to the bathroom, they follow in tow. So I think there is very much this whole, like, a sense of, is this okay? They're kind of like shepherding her. And she, of course, will laugh and does the, like, I don't need to be herded. I know how to find the bathroom, But I do think they have a sense of that. And we do use the dogs a lot in the dementia care units. For that very reason, again, that the stroking is very, very rhythmic for most of our residents and really important. And when you think about Alzheimer's disease, the deepest area of the cortex is what's preserved until the very end, and that usually is more of our automatic, habitual kinds of things where people can recognize a dog. They understand what to do with the dog because it's not something that is in conscious cognitive awareness, or they don't have to use the skills that are now lost from the disease. So we really, really rely on the dogs for our best the therapy programs.
What organization do you get them from?
It's a variety because we have people, they have to have their papers to come into any of the facilities. And I consult nationally, so it's really wherever they're at within the organizations, in their communities, if they're vetted and they have their papers. But they're usually volunteer organizations and people, a lot of people who are doing senior projects in high school or some of the shelters that have people that are doing projects, things like that.
Is it, I mean, we like cats, they just start real good in the therapy setting or not as cooperative. I'm just kidding. If anybody owns a cat,
They're just kind of there.
you just know that you're not taking your cat out of the house to go with anybody. Okay.
My mother's in the UK in a nursing home, and they have both a cat and a dog that comes and visits them on a weekly basis. I haven't seen the cat yet.
Well, that's the cat.
Apparently he turns up.
Yes.
So, I don't know.
In a couple of the assisted livings, not in the memory care unit, I think because we need larger dogs, larger animals, just really for the safety of the animal as well. But in the assisted side, we certainly have had things like rabbits and, but again, being mindful in this case of what's therapeutic for the animal too, when you have somebody that, it's hard sometimes to redirect, so.
In my house, we have a dog and 2 cats. And the cats, most dog people think that cats are just, they're not good and they're just, they're uppity and all that, and they're not. If you, I'm just an animal lover, but if you, love your cats, I have one cat, Boris, who will come and sit on my lap. He sits there and stares at me until I say, okay, come on over. And he sits on my lap and he's very comfortable. And then he'll crawl up on my shoulder. And especially if I'm not in a good mood, if I've had something sad happen or whatever. So I think it kind of depends. And then we have a younger cat also. If you have animals in your house and I think you treat them well, they treat you well back. I really do. So yeah, they're not as wonderful is this dog, you know, that, you know, everybody can pet and he's just great. But, I mean, my cats are wonderful, don't get me wrong, but I mean, you know, I'm not gonna bring my cats out here so everybody can see them, you know, and get you know, what they do, and I don't think cats do the same thing as the dogs that you're talking about do.
Well-
But on a one-on-one, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that I think that the reason that dogs mostly are used for things like that is because they can smell it. Cats don't have as keen of a sense of smell as like some dogs do. Yeah, yeah.
You're talking about apples and oranges.
Yeah, I mean their personalities are completely different, but they do have like the same soothing effects on people. But dogs can smell. Like, you know, they say that they can sense seizures before anybody knows that it's gonna happen.
Diabetics also.
Yeah, they can tell you when your
High or low.
blood sugar's high or low. Yeah, so things like that, which makes them a little more calming to be used for things like that. Yeah.
But on the different side of that, when you look at, when we talk about stress and depression, you know, I know for myself, if we're dealing with somebody who has really profound depression, any reason to get out of bed and taking care of a living creature, whether that's your rabbit, it's the cat, it's whatever, I feel better knowing they've got to do that. That's the thing that pushes and propels them to get out of bed.
Themselves, you think about what,
Exactly.
who they're taking care
And
of,
with-
so they will do something for that animal,
Right.
or they won't do it for themselves.
Right. And part of depression is, you know, you turn inward, and so any therapeutic technique we can use that gets somebody to focus outside of themselves, staying connected, staying active, having a routine, and that's a perfect place where when I know somebody has a pet, I'm a little less concerned about some of that isolation, particularly in our seniors. Which I'm thrilled about the program because, again, I have to really commend the folks who we're talking about. It is our seniors then who are on fixed income who say, you know, I'm going to have to put this dog down, or I'm going to have to give this dog up because I can't afford it. You know, we do everything we can in our community, and so I'm thrilled and I applaud you for what you're doing because they are so life-sustaining for our seniors. So, yes.
I was just gonna say, in defense of dogs and cats, we had a cat who would play fetch.
My cat plays fetch.
How far you throw it, you
You're
bring
an
it back.
exceptional cat.
My cat wins.
She's a cat lady, though. She did confess she has 16 of them in her house.
I told Dr. Stevick that I used to be afraid that I'd be like the old woman surrounded by cats. And after my last couple of relationships, I'm like, you know, I'm looking forward to that. You know, it's not a bad thing.
There's a line, though. There's a difference between 4 or 5, but when you start to get to 35, then you gotta.
I'll give you a call.
Any other questions, things that you want to share?
Well, I did read a book, and they did talk about this cat that would go visit the people who were on their way to dying. And the cat would go and visit the person until they passed on to the next stage, and then it would go find the next person that needed them. So I thought that was a very interesting read, not just from the viewpoint. It was written by a physician, and he was telling the story, and I learned actually through reading that it wasn't so much the story about the cat, but through that cat he learned a lot more about how to be more compassionate towards the entire family. Did you read that book?
I
or
did
have you
read
heard
that
the
book, but
I
I
read that
know
book.
that, I mean, I think the principles of, I do some work with hospice, and they have animals, if anybody's ever been to some of the hospice houses, hospice center. But on the reverse side of this, we use them a lot because they will sit in the doorway and wait to be welcomed in, so that, you know, the care is such that the patient really could benefit from having the dog in the room. If not, the dog sits and waits. But really the handlers, we had to find, which again was not my area of expertise, but they had to point out to us that they needed to keep rotating because the dogs were beginning to struggle because of so much death, and the strain on the dogs, you know, there was one and it was there for a long time. They had to keep swapping them out because, again, of that emotional connection of not only what was happening to the person and the benefit, but the toll it was taking on the dog, as it is for any care provider who's, you know, providing care for somebody who's terminally and chronically ill.
And interestingly, just today we happen to have a blog out about how pets have anxiety and stress. And there are ways that you can decrease anxiety in your dog or your cat. So does anybody here have an experience with a dog or a cat that you know was anxious or scared, or I hear giggles, so I'm just thinking yes. So who here has a story about their animal and what they ended up doing to try to either rectify the situation, or because they didn't know how to handle the situation, ended up finding a different solution for that animal?
Do you want to know the story?
Yes.
I had a dog that he was a German Shorthair, and when he was alone and there was a storm, he would break windows to come find me. And there were times when I raced home from work, and one time I pulled the driveway, I heard the glass breaking. So he had serious anxiety about storms, and if he was alone, that was too much for him. So the vet gave me, I think, Doggy Valium, the equivalent at the time. I also tried beer. He liked beer. It helped him. But the 4th of July was a nightmare for me when I had him, because I couldn't go anywhere because he hated the fireworks. Even if they were right outside my window, they could have been 3 blocks away, and this was still too much.
Well, what's nice is I went to the Midwest Veterinary Conference earlier this year, and I learned a lot about animal behaviorists and veterinary behaviorists. And now there's much more help for people who have an animal. A cat frequently will display signs of fear or anxiety by not using the kitty litter pan. And that's a frequent reason why people relinquish their animals to the shelter. And so knowing this, and we do have a wonderful animal behaviorist, a veterinary behaviorist in our area who can help treat cats and dogs who are anxious and scared. And scared dogs, any dog can bite. Any dog can bite. And they will always give you a warning sign. When it gets to the growl, you've already escalated it almost to the bite. So I learned a lot about how to look for the warning signs in dogs and the resources that are now available that didn't used to be available. When I was going to school, I graduated veterinary school in '93, and back then there wasn't a lot of discussion about animal behavior. And so animals, just like people, experience fear, anxiety, and stress. So I think it's just kind of fortuitous that the blog came out at the same time we're having this event tonight. So if anybody has any issues with a dog or cat that's experiencing these kind of things, and your veterinarian doesn't have the tools in their toolbox because maybe they didn't receive the training, please feel free to reach out and I can help you find those resources in our area. So anybody else want to share? I can share actually a story about my cat who hasn't been peeing in the kitty litter pan. So you really want the vet to have the perfect animal. Doesn't always happen. I also have one who's very heavy. She's not fat. She's just over fluffy. That's what she keeps telling us. But one of our cats decided not to use the kitty litter pan, and so I, like most pet owners, Dr. Google, and you have to be careful when you're Googling things, because you might find that it's your friend who talked to their friend who talked to their friend, but not to a professional. And if you're not talking to a professional, you might be getting some kind of good ideas, but they're not the best ideas. So seek out professionals, but also ask your professionals whether they have training in that particular thing. So I would say, don't turn to me specifically for any pet-specific diseases. That's where I would go to Dr. Brian and say, I have this client who has parvo. How do I manage that? Dr. Brian, you take care of that dog. If I have a cat who's peeing outside the kitty litter can, I know which veterinarian is a veterinary behaviorist. For dogs that have anxiety and they don't like strangers, they are very anxious about you leaving, there are other veterinarians out there for that. And then there's also just dog trainers. So we need to find those dog trainers. Now, who here has heard of, one of the famous dog people that are on the TV show? Cesar Millan. My advice to you, is to take everything he says with a ginormous grain of salt. He's about dominance and the pack, and there's certain buzzwords now that I know to look for to say that trainer might not be the one best for your situation. Now it's much more about rewards. Food are not bribes. You reward good behavior, behavior that you want to see. And I was really enlightened having gone to the Midwest Veterinary Conference this last time about what to look for in a good trainer. So I'm very happy that the two young ladies that we have here today know that rewarding good behavior through food is appropriate and gets results that are positive. So again, if you want resources, Dr. Bryan can provide resources in the medical care of animals, dogs and cats, and he's done a lot of work with people from all walks of life, as he said, and you're dealing with older adults. So I think this is really a great bunch of resources for you. Since you came here, now you know who to talk to about financial assistance, you know who to talk to about pet health care insurance plans to help. I mean, I know my behavior before I had pet health insurance was hearing my husband go, oh, that's going to be really expensive, and I would get anxious. Yeah, honey, I'm talking about you. And I would get anxious, and I wouldn't know if I could afford that, whatever treatment it was. But now I don't have to be afraid of that. I know I don't have to worry that that $1,000, that $3,000, I'll get a portion of that covered, so I don't have to worry about that. And then with a financial situation, you know, talk to your spouse about your financial situation. Know what your financial situation. That's very important for women, because a lot of times women, if they get married to a man the man who's going to take care of them financially, it's important for all of us to know what our financial situation is like. So having a resource like Molly at Laurel Tree Advisors, of course there are other advisors out there, but it's really important.
But not as good, but not as good as Molly.
But it's really important to know that you have a strong financial future in front of you, and anyone can help themselves today moving forward. So don't beat yourself up for what you didn't do yesterday, because I can certainly do that with, well, why didn't I do this for my cat or whatever. But moving forward now, I know what to do. I know what your resources are, and I think that this evening has really shown us that there's plenty of resources in mental health and in working with animals who can provide services for us if we have PTSD, right? So I implore you to use this network that we've created tonight to further your health and well-being, your feeling of decreasing the cortisol, learning from what Dr. Lori has talked about.